Generally, Athens was ruled by people we can say elected, or they ruled through they came to power through consensus of the dwellers of the city. And this was not only in Athens but many other Greek city-states. But sometimes tyrants came to power, and these are people who force themselves to power and then they remain there without the support of the people. They basically force the people to do whatever they wanted them to do and to accept them as their rulers. Now, Athens at one time did have a tyrant rule over them, and it was a tyrant and his family, and this is the family of Pisistratus. Now, Herodotus does not tell us in histories, or he does not give us this story as just one story you will find in one place. In fact, you have to pick bits from different parts of the book to form this story of the family of Pisistratus who ruled over Athens. And that's what I did. I went through the book and picked several bits of stories from different parts of the book. Now, it's hard to tell how long the family ruled over Athens, but we can get estimates by using other stories in the book. For example, we know that the family of Pisistratus came to power sometime before Cyrus the Great became the king of Persia. And Cyrus did rule for close to 40 years, I think, and then Cambyses ruled for around 20 years. I might be wrong, but I'm guessing. And then when this family was removed from power, it was Darius who was in power in Persia. So we are looking at maybe 70 to 80 years they were in power. That's a long time. Now, Pisistratus, the first of this family to come to power in Athens, was not supposed to be born. This is how that is. His father, Hippocrates, was an ordinary citizen, a private citizen of Athens. He wasn't someone of any notable ranking or position or anything in the city, really. He was just a private guy, like most Athenians. So there's this one time he went to Olympia to watch the games, the Olympics. He went to Olympia, and it seems like everyone who went to Olympia either was expected or saw it fit to offer sacrifices to gods. I don't have information on that, but it seems like there was something like either it was expected or it was the right time, or it was an opportune time to offer sacrifices to God. So Hippocrates goes to Olympia to watch the games, and while there he decides to offer sacrifices. And while he's preparing to sacrifice, there was a pot on fire next to where he was, and this pot started to boil and there was no fire. And the person who was in charge of this place, I will assume maybe an oracle or something like that, tells him that what this means, it means that he should never have a child. So Hippocrates is told, it seems like the gods are telling you, you should not have kids, and if you already have any, you should disown them. So those are the instructions that he was given. So Hippocrates goes back home, but he doesn't, he disobeys. He doesn't do according to the advice he was given. He goes ahead and he marries and he has a child, and that child is Pisistratus. Now, Pisistratus grew in Athens like other kids of his time, and then he was a young man. Now, at the time when he's a young man, there was a kind of like a political or civil strife in the city. There were people fighting over power. Herodotus doesn't tell us that it was really like people killing one another or anything like that, but people were just, there was this strife, political strife in the city. And Pisistratus was smart enough, and he decides to take advantage of that civil strife to make himself a leader of Athens. And what he does, he forms, okay, the political strife was between two parties. There were two parties fighting over power in Athens. The one party was known as the Seakos. It was headed by a guy called Megacles. The other one was known as the Plain, and it was headed by a guy known as Lycurgus. These two parties were like of equal force and power, and neither of the two will overcome the other and be like the overall ruler of Athens. Now, Pisistratus decides to take to take that as an opportunity, and he forms his own party. He named his party the Party of the Highlanders. Herodotus doesn't tell us why he called his Pisistratus called his party the Party of the Highlanders. Now he has this party. He starts to persuade Athenians to be his followers and to join his party, and many join. And now in a short while, his party is also a contender for power, like it's almost an equal of the other two parties. And then he does something. This is something that I especially, okay, let me not say that. Okay, let me just say that even now in some places in the world, politicians do this. Like they can organize for themselves to be kind of hurt, maybe attacked somehow, and then come out and claim, oh, my enemies attacked me, and now out of that they get some sympathy following from the public. And that's what Pisistratus does. Pisistratus one day leaves the city with his mules. I guess he was riding a mule or mules pulling his carriage or something like that. He goes out of the city. He hurts himself, he wounds his animals, and then he comes back to the city. And he tells the city people that my enemies attacked me, and they injured me, and they injured my animals. And people feel pity for him, of course, like, who do this to you? This is not okay. And he tells them, because now looks like my enemies are really want to maybe to kill me or something like that, I'm requesting you people to allow me to be walking around with bodyguards. And Athenians are like, no problem, just form a group of people to be walking around with to protect you so that your enemies don't attack you again. So he forms a band of bodyguards, but they are told to not to be armed, but with clubs only. But this band grows and grows and becomes bigger and becomes bigger. And before the Athenians know it, Pisistratus uses this band to seize power. He seizes power and he becomes the ruler of Athens. But he becomes a very just and kind ruler, and people kind of like him. He doesn't change the rules. He lets the rules that were there to be the rules that continue functioning. He basically just becomes a ruler, but he decides to do things the way Athenians have always done things. But a short while later, the two other parties, the Seakos and under Megacles and the Plain under Lycurgus, these two parties join forces. They have an agreement. They cease fighting each other, and they come together, and they decide to remove Pisistratus from power. And they remove him from power, but not long after, they started wrangling again. Then they start fighting again. After removing Pisistratus from power, they start wrangling and fighting again. They are fighting and fighting. And this is another opportunity again for Pisistratus to come back to power. Now, this is the second time he's coming to power. This time round, he's invited by the leader of the Seacoast, Megacles. Megacles goes to him in secret, by the way. They don't make it public. He goes in secret. He meets Pisistratus. They have a conversation. He tells him, the other guys who we are in power with, we are having issues, and I'm inviting you to come over, and we form an alliance, and then we give you to be the leader of Athens. And Pisistratus accepts the offer. Now, part of the agreement was he was going to marry the daughter of Megacles, and after he's come to power now. But now they have a challenge. How are they going to bring Pisistratus back to Athens and persuade the Athenians to accept him again as their leader? And then they decide to do something. And this something they do, Herodotus describes it as something that he couldn't expect to happen in Athens. I'll read what Herodotus says. And here the device on which they hit was the silliest that I find on record. More especially considering that the Greeks have been from the very ancient times distinguished from the barbarians by superior sagacity and freedom from foolish simpleness. And remembering that the persons on whom this trick was played were not only Greeks, but the Athenians, who have the credit of surpassing all other Greeks in cleverness. So according to Herodotus, the trick that Pisistratus and Megacles decided to play on Athenians was so stupid, and he was surprised that the Athenians fell for it, because he understood that Athenians were the smartest of all Greeks. And generally Greeks were considered, of course they consider themselves, Herodotus was a Greek himself, they consider themselves to be the most smart people in the world, except for Egyptian, because Herodotus does say in some part of the book that the Greeks understood or accepted that Egyptians were the smartest, the wisest, and then followed by the Greeks. So, and this trick worked, and it was a very simple and stupid one. Like, it wasn't something. And this is what Pisistratus and Megacles did. They went and found a woman, a tall woman from somewhere, and they dressed her in some costumes, and then put her on a carriage that was pulled across the city. And then they presented her to the Athenians that she was the goddess Minerva. Now she was being pulled across the city as the goddess Minerva, and the Athenians were just worshipping her, believing that indeed this was goddess Minerva. And now goddess Minerva was telling them that they should accept Pisistratus as their ruler. And the Athenians accepted him. And that's why Herodotus was so surprised that they did accept that this was goddess Minerva coming and instructing them as Athenians to accept Pisistratus again as their ruler. But anyways, they accepted him as their ruler. He came back to power, and he did marry the daughter of Megacles. But a short while later, this scheme was discovered. And when it was discovered, Pisistratus ran away. He ran out of Athens. So he goes out again. Now when he's away, he starts scheming how he can come back the third time and become the ruler of Athens. Now this time, the third time is coming. Now he's coming to be a full tyrant. Because what he does, he goes and he sits down with his sons. Now he has, at this point, he has two sons, Hippias and Hippocrates. Hippias and Hippocrates was his son. Herodotus doesn't tell us whether he had other kids, but these are the ones that are mentioned a lot. And they will continue coming up going forward. So he goes, he sits down with his son Hippias and Hippocrates, and they scheme how to come back to Athens. This time round, they collect money. While Pisistratus was in power in Athens, he had formed these networks with people from other islands and city-states. And through these people, he accumulated a lot of wealth. And then he used this wealth to hire mercenaries. He hired mercenaries from Naxos, from other cities, and from other places in Greece. And he came with them to Athens, and he attacked Athens, and he overcame the city, and he became the ruler now, a tyrant now, because now from that point onward, he relied on mercenaries to rule Athenians. Anything he did, he trusted mercenaries, he paid from outside to do his bidding in the city. And now he became a tyrant. And he ruled, we don't know for how long, and then he died. And when he died, his son Hippias became the king. Now, Hippias continued with his father's policies and way of doing things. And then at some point, his brother was, because now Athenians hated this family so much. They didn't like them, of course. And at some point, they killed his brother. Some families murdered Hippocrates. Hippocrates was murdered. And after Hippocrates was murdered, Hippias became even more brutal on Athenians because he became even more cruel, because now he had this bitterness that they had killed his brother. And besides killing some of the Athenian families, he did banish some that he thought were a threat to his power. And among those who were banished is the family of the Alcanidae. Now, Alcanidae, have told you this story in another video. Now, this family leaves after being banished out of Athens. They go, and then now this family that organizes the final removal of Hippias and the Pisistratus family from power. What they do, they were also very wealthy, this family. They go and they build a temple, I've told you this, near Athens, and then Athenians will come to this temple for whatever reasons. And every Athenian who came to this temple, this family had bribed the oracle in the temple. So every Athenian who came, it didn't matter what they came to ask the oracle will tell them whatever they came for, but they will also tell them that the god says that you people must free Athens from the tyrant, Hippias, and his family. So every Athenian who was coming was being told this. It was this propaganda. And over time, every Athenian came to believe that the gods were indeed expecting them to remove Hippias and his family from power. And then they started organizing. While they are organizing, the family of the Alcanidae were also organizing from outside, and they got support from the Spartans. The Spartans gave them support to come and remove Hippias from power. Now, when the Spartans gave them an army, and this Alcanidae family came together, and the Athenians, who had now believed that the gods expected them to remove this family from power, they came together and they came to the city to remove Hippias from power. Herodotus tells us that it's likely that they would not have succeeded to remove him from power, except that something happened that made it possible for them to remove him from power. Now, it seems like Hippias and the rest of the family of Pisistratus were worried when they saw these people who have come and laid siege to the city, and they decided maybe they should take their children, the children of the Pisistratus family, out of the city and take them to a safe place, so that when this chaos is taken care of, those kids can come back. But as the kids were being taken out of the city, they were captured by the people who were leading the revolt. And now they became a bargaining chip, and Hippias was told, if you don't get out of power, we're going to kill these kids. So he had no other option. He left, and he left Athens. Now, when he left Athens, the one guy from the family of the Alcanidae, a guy known as Clisthenes, came to power, and he was joined by another guy called Isagoras. They became the people who now are ruling Athens. Now, they were not tyrants. They were people ruling through they have been given the mandate by the people, the Athenians, to rule. Basically, that was the arrangement. Now, remember, the Spartans are the ones who provided the army that helped the Athenians to remove Hippias from power. But the Spartans did not help Athenians do this because they liked them, or no, they were doing it for their own reasons. They wanted a puppet in power. But Clisthenes and this other guy, Isagoras, turned out that they were not the puppets that the Spartans wanted in Athens. And not long after, in fact, Sparta started to scheme to bring back Hippias. and Sparta formed an alliance with other city-states, and initially it tricked these other city-states to come together to form an alliance to go to Athens and remove Clisthenes and Isagoras from power, and then Putin. But they didn't tell the other allies that they wanted to bring Hippias back. Now, while they are approaching Athens, that's when they tell these other guys that we want to put Hippias back in power. And this was not acceptable to these other people, these other Greeks. They were like, we know Hippias was a tyrant. Him and his father were tyrants. And Athenians managed to remove them from power. Now you want to bring a tyrant back to power in Athens, while the rest of us don't like tyrants. Even Sparta itself did not have a tyrant at that. It was under the leadership of Cleomenes, and Cleomenes was not a tyrant per se. So they were like, especially the Corinths, and I've told you this in another video, the Corinths were so adamant about it, and they were like, we are not going to accept this to happen. We are not going to allow you to bring Hippias back. So that alliance fell, it did not succeed. Clisthenes continued to rule Athens. But then Hippias is out there. Hippias goes to Sardis to meet the satrap of that place, that the governor that was put in that place by the Persians. He goes there at this time, Hippias is going to Sardis. This is Darius, who is the king of Persia. And Antiphanes is the governor in Sardis. So he goes, he meets Antiphanes. And he starts telling the Persians, I can help you conquer Athens if you promise to make me a tyrant of Athens, but I will continue, I'll be under you become my overlords. Like, I have no problem Persia being the overlord of Athens, as long as I'm the guy in charge of Athens. And the Persians agree. And in fact, as Hippias is talking to the Persians, the Athens hear about it. They know Hippias is trying to persuade the Persians. And the Athenians send an embassy to Sardis to try to persuade the Persians that stop talking to Hippias. Hippias is not our leader. You should not entertain him at all. And they go to Antiphanes and they tell him this. And Antiphanes tells them, I think it's in your best interest if you accept Hippias back as your ruler. And now the Athenians are disturbed about this answer. And that's why when Milesians came, as Aristogoras from Miletus came to persuade them to join him into going and attacking Sardis, they accepted, because now they were bitter with the Persians. They knew Persians were up to something with Hippias. They were planning to bring Hippias to Athens. And so they go, they burn down Sardis, and that makes Darius keen on punishing Athens. Now, the last time Hippias is mentioned by Herodotus in his book Histories is when Darius has sent two generals, Datis and another Antiphanes, if I'm not wrong. He sent them to go and attack Eritrea and attack Athens. Now they come, they attack Eritrea, they conquer it. Now they plan to go to Athens. That's the last time he mentions Hippias. Hippias happens to be the guy who is guiding the Persians to come to attack Athens. And seems like the plan was still in place, that after Athens is captured by the Persians, they were going to install Hippias as the tyrant. At this time, Hippias is very old. And how do we know? Herodotus tells us of this story that as they were planning to attack Athens, they are at a field, I think it was Marathon or somewhere, and Hippias sneezes and coughs very hard. And because he was very old and his teeth were loose, one of the teeth falls out of his mouth and falls down. And Hippias goes looking for the tooth. He looks all over the place. He's trying to look for the tooth, but he didn't find it. And finally he says, you know what? At my tooth, the place that my tooth will be occupying on this land is like the only place I own on this land. Something like that. So from that we know that he was very old. Now Hippias guides the Persians. The Persians go to Marathon. They fight with the Athenians, who are trying to defend themselves. And in the end of it, I've told you in the previous video, the Athenians won, and the Persians left and went back to Asia. From that point, Herodotus doesn't mention Hippias again or any of his family members. So that becomes like the end of Hippias and the family of Pisistratus. We don't know where Hippias went and died. We don't know what happened to that family from that point.